Hi, I'm Jamie Braithwaite.
And I'm Dr. Matt Larson. And this is Monday's Mental Health Minute with Dr. Matt.
Perfect execution on that.
We nailed it. We finally got the title right.
Yes.
So what I want to talk about today is I hear the word, well, let's talk about two words today. The word toxic and the word trigger.
Ooh, I like both of those words.
Because I hear these words all the time. And I want to talk about what they mean, what they're useful for, and how they're overused and misapplied.
Okay.
So here, pick one, toxic or trigger. Which one's first?
I like trigger first.
Okay, so let's talk about a trigger. When most people say the word trigger or trigger warning, etc., what they're talking about is something disturbing.
Okay.
And that's all they mean.
Okay.
Like when the news says trigger warning, it has nothing to do with trigger. It just means this is disturbing content.
Okay.
It might disturb you.
Okay.
That's not a trigger at all.
Oh, lovely. Thank
Right?
you.
They misapply the term.
Okay.
So let's talk about what a trigger actually is. A trigger is something that in most locations and most moments is completely harmless, does nothing.
Interesting.
And in one location, it releases an amazing force, usually dangerous. Like my example is, for those not watching the video, if I just move my pointer finger and squeeze it back and forth in the air, it does nothing.
Okay.
It's just sitting in the air, doing nothing. If it's on the trigger of a gun pointed at something, all of a sudden it can release deadly force.
Literally.
That's a literal trigger.
Okay.
Something that most places does nothing, and in one location is deadly or is a massive amount.
Okay.
So a trigger, for most people, the correct meaning is something has happened in your life that makes this one sound, this one smell, this one sight let off a huge emotional reaction in you. And everyone around you, nothing.
Okay.
Like someone was assaulted by a bald man wearing a red backpack.
Very specific.
And for them, when they see it, they are terrified because it reminds them of the thing that happened. For everyone else walking by, bald guy, red backpack, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Blue car is not triggering.
Yeah.
Science class isn't triggering. Church, look, there's a cross on a Christian church. Okay, not triggering.
Yeah.
Somebody with religious trauma, amazingly triggering. I'll talk to people who are, like my daughter's training to be an EMT right now. I'll work with patients who had a family member die in a car accident. And they were in the ambulance when they passed with them or something like that.
Okay.
Sirens for most of us, it's a sign we have to pull over.
Right.
Like if I hear a siren, I'm like, okay, pull over, wait for the fire truck to go by, the ambulance to go by, get back on. It doesn't trigger me.
Right.
It's an ambulance.
Right.
For that person,
It takes them right back to that moment.
it takes them back to that moment. They are reliving that moment. That's what PTSD is, reliving. That's why the word trigger became a mental health term when it talked about PTSD.
Okay.
Shopping in the grocery store could be triggering for someone, where everyone else is just walking through a grocery store. So when teenagers say, I'm triggered, what they usually mean is, I'm stressed.
Okay.
And I don't fight them on the term. Like, that is the wrong moment. When they say, I'm triggered, I don't say, you're using the term wrong. You're wrong.
Because that will help.
You're not triggered. Because it doesn't help. But I will ask them, I'm like, is it something stressing you now? Or is it something that happened in your past that you're reliving? And
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I'll try to ask them. And then they can explain. And so when I work with my kids, I don't try to correct them every time.
I don't think my kids have ever said that word. Maybe I've never heard that
I hear it
word.
in mental health all the time.
All the time. So
People
kids come in and say,
Like, I was triggered.
I was triggered by this.
I was triggered by this.
Okay.
It's like, I was triggered by the bully making fun of the kid in the hallway. I'm like, that's disturbing to everyone.
You're not special.
That's just inappropriate bullying behavior. When people talk about triggers, don't ignore them or correct them or say they're wrong. Just ask, hey, what's stressing you out? How do we end it? Because likely it's just something they shouldn't have seen and something that shouldn't be happening.
Got it. Okay.
When people talk about toxic, people will say like, oh, that's a toxic person.
Ah.
It was a toxic relationship. I was in a toxic relationship.
Yeah,
that
which
person
is
is so
like-
toxic.
I've heard
Politics is
toxic a
toxic.
lot.
Republicans are toxic. Democrats are toxic.
Yes.
Trump, Biden, pick your person.
Right.
They're toxic, whatever.
And every ex-boyfriend or
Right.
ex-girlfriend
Every ex
is
toxic. Right. My favorite example about toxicity was actually from my junior high friend of mine, Nathan Zahner. You can still Google him, and he pops up on Wikipedia for his junior high science project.
Oh my word. This is exciting.
It was amazing.
Okay.
So Eagle Rock Junior High in Idaho Falls.
Okay.
That's where I went. He made a project and he tried to get his classmates to sign a petition to ban dihydrogen monoxide.
Wait, to ban what?
Dihydrogen monoxide. And he had this whole list of all the things it causes, that in excess it will kill you. It causes hyperurination and sweating. It's used in nuclear power plants. It's found in toxic chemicals and cleaning agents. It causes worldwide erosion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And at the end, he writes out dihydrogen monoxide, which is H2O.
Oh.
And it's water.
Yes. Very toxic.
And it was hilarious. And it was a joke about how gullible people are.
Yeah.
And you're like, water does do all those things. Like he had this whole list
Yeah.
of all the things
Of
water
all the
does.
terrible things
All
that
the
water
terrible things
does.
about water.
Interesting.
And it reminded me toxicity is about amounts and locations. Like when you put water in your mouth, you're fine. When it goes down your throat, if it goes over your epiglottis into your stomach, that's where it's supposed to go. And it helps you with nutrients and blood volume and everything else to work great. If it goes into your lungs, it's toxic.
We've all done.
It
and
kills
like,
you. Right. Because water in the wrong location or in the wrong amount. Now, guess what happens if you drink too much water into your stomach? You can die.
especially if you're not urinating correctly, that gets into kidneys, that causes all kinds of problems.
Exactly. So when I'm talking with people about toxicity, it's usually about location and amount. One example I give people is my best friend in high school. We wanted to spend as much time together as possible. After school, we would spend the whole afternoon, the whole evening. It was great. And we said, let's schedule all of our classes together next trimester. So we did. 3 weeks into school, we hated each other.
Oh, no.
It was awful. We could not stand that much time together. And I realized we have a toxic level of contact. If we pass about 6 or 7 hours a day, that's too much. The concentration's too high. Our toxic level is 7 hours. So we reduced to one class together in school, choir, and then we hung out the whole afternoon, and we were great friends again.
Because you never reached that 7 hour.
Because we avoided toxic levels with each other.
Interesting.
He's not a toxic person. Us in contact isn't toxic. It was the amount of time together.
That was the toxic.
Right.
Toxicity.
It's like watching people who they're married forever and they retire. And they can't handle each other at first. Because they're used to 3 or 4 hours a day together, and now they've got 12.
Yeah.
And they have to adjust the relationship because they're not used to that. I have people in my life I can enjoy for a whole road trip. Other people I can't enjoy for a whole road trip.
Yeah.
I have friends I can talk to on a podcast week after week after week, and I love it. Other people, a 10-minute conversation is so hard. We always go over 10 minutes. When you're working on relationships, just realize you can be friends with pretty much everyone in the world for some amount of time in some location. It won't be all locations, it won't be all amounts. Toxicity is about amount and location. I can be friends with you a lot of hours, a lot of time. Probably not all the time.
No.
Too much, we would bug each other.
Yep.
The relationship would turn sour.
And there's been times where we do even take breaks.
Right.
Naturally.
Right.
Because we're adults and we
Adults,
figured
life
that
change.
out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those are the two things I wanted to cover today was trigger and toxic. What trigger means and what a trigger is. And then toxicity. Every relationship can be toxic. Every value can be overused. Everything you do can get too much or the wrong place or the wrong time. And it's just about, I can be friends with everybody, just right amount of time, right place.
I love that. That's a great conversation starter this week to talk with your teenagers, parents, friends, anybody about I don't even know how you would start that conversation, though.
I mean, truly, that's like when people say, like, I can't stand this person. Like, okay, where do you enjoy them? Nowhere.
Yeah.
You're like, okay.
Well, and
in class, in the grocery store, at basketball practice, at church, there is a place they're probably good and productive with you. There's people I invite to my house to watch a movie. There's people I invite to a party. There's people I go to their house. And you just find the right relationship with the right people. And that's what we call boundaries.
I think we should talk about boundaries on the next week.
We'll make boundaries next week.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Jamie. This was Monday's Mental Health Minute with Dr. Matt.